Welcome back to Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers, the podcast devoted to exploring the frontiers of psychedelic medicine and what it takes to cultivate a healthy mind, body, and spirit. I'm Dr. Steve Thayer, and today my co-host, Dr. Reed Robinson, and I are joined again on the show by Hannah Cross. Hannah is a regular guest on the show, and today we're doing our second installment in our series on relationships. Hannah is a licensed clinical social worker, expert therapist, Reiki master, yoga teacher, ecstatic dance facilitator, and an expert at using psychedelic medicines to enhance the psychotherapy process. In this episode, we explore the concept of love and how to make it last in relationships. No small task to explore this concept. We hope you find it useful. If you do, please give us a glowing review on whatever podcast app you use to listen to the show. And share it. Share the episode with a friend or maybe a lover or partner who you think needs to hear it. And now I present to you Hannah Cross. Welcome back. Oh, you beat me to it.
Almost.
Everybody to psychedelic. Maybe we should take turns. You know, I've been so presumptuous in welcoming everyone back to Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers.
I've been enjoying you taking the welcome back role. So.
Yeah.
I just had to try and throw you off.
Well, thank you. I need to be thrown off. I need that those triggers as friends to follow, like we say.
Mm-hmm.
Big things up a little bit.
And that other voice that those of you who aren't watching on YouTube that you all just heard was Hannah Cross. Hannah is joining us again on the podcast for our second installment in a relationship series.
Oh, yeah.
So for those people who are listening or watching who don't know Hannah, could you introduce yourself?
Yep, and thanks for having me back, you two.
Yeah.
My name's Hannah Cross. I'm a therapist. I do quite a bit of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy at this point in my career, mostly with the assistance of ketamine, and like to bring in some somatic therapies into what I do. I do a number of different trauma-based modalities, like to help people get back into their body, and yeah, there's a start.
Amazing. A note to self, I want to ask, not right now, I'll let Steve take us somewhere, but ask about embodiment and relationships. Just how it plays a role.
This is a note to self for later on in the episode. Okay,
Yeah.
noted.
Mentally bookmark, yeah.
Because it does play a role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, last time, our first episode in this sort of relationship series, we talked a lot about different relationship containers. We talked about masculine, feminine energies. We talked a little bit about different ways that manifests in the relationship. A little bit about sex and sexual preferences. Today, I thought maybe we could explore this idea of how to make love last. So what does that evoke in your minds, you two? When I sort of, I'll ask it as a question. How do we make love last or love stay?
How to make love stay. It evokes a memory of a quote from a favorite book called Still Life with Woodpecker by the one and only Tom Robbins, who is hanging out somewhere along the Pacific Northwest right now, typing away on his typewriter, but I'll read it if you'd like.
Please.
Okay. This is profound. Prepare yourself.
I'm bracing myself for profundity.
Who knows how to make love stay? You have three options here, Steve. So number one, tell love you're going to Junior's Deli on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn to pick up a cheesecake, and if love stays, it can have half. It will stay. Number two, tell love you want a memento of it and obtain a lock of its hair. Burn the hair in a dime store incense burner with yin-yang symbols on three sides. Face southwest, talk fast over the burning hair in a convincingly exotic language. Remove the ashes of the burnt hair and use them to paint a mustache on your face. Find love, tell it you're someone new, and it will stay. And number three, which I think is my favorite, but wake love up in the middle of the night, tell it the world is on fire. Dash to the bedroom window and pee out of it. Casually return to bed and assure love that everything is going to be all right. Fall asleep, love will be there in the morning.
So love will stay if you share food with it, if you cast a magical spell, and if you have a manic episode.
Number two is kind of like bring newness, spice it up.
Bring some ritual. There's some ritual to it as well. There's some magic to it too, right? So like lean into the magic of love.
It is magic. It is a magical thing that occurs that we don't it's beyond the neurotransmitters, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good word to use to describe love, that it's magical, because it feels,
Mystical.
I don't know. It does. It feels mystical. It feels difficult to explain. We talk about the psychedelic experience being ineffable. I think love in and of itself is pretty ineffable.
I was thinking about that. Like, love is mysterious, almost like the universe works in mysterious ways, or like the workings of God are mysterious. I think love is kind of like that. And there's like this, I guess, this paradox around love, which is like, you really can't control it. Like, one of the big lessons around love is like, how do I surrender to this without trying to control it? I mean, really, that's impossible. But at the same time, and I think what we're going to talk a little bit about today is like, what can you do to cultivate a loving relationship that makes it through time and space, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because you can't make love stay. You try to put love in a cage. That's not how to make it stay. That's where you see relationships implode, crash and burn. But from that same book, love is the ultimate outlaw. It just won't adhere to any rules. You know, you may want to like try and honor and obey it, but really it's just, all you can do is sign on, buckle up, say you'll aid and abet, and that you're along for the ride, and surrender.
Absolutely. There's also, I think, this like statement of like, love just is. And a lot of people glimpse that in the psychedelic experience, right? You hear people say things like, all there is love, and that's really all that matters. Or I'm like always held in love, and I've always been held in love. Everything that's happened is like for this movement towards love. And so when we ask that question, like, how do you make love stay? It's so important when we're looking at relationships, and we're looking at like this time-space dimension. But at the same time, like there is some level where love just is, whether we're trying to make it stay or not.
It speaks to one of our greatest fears, right? Like, the root of all suffering is this illusion of separation. Like, we're afraid of dying. We're afraid of losing our loved ones. We're afraid that love won't stay. And it gets in the way of so many people even getting into relationship due to fear of getting hurt. Or when you're in relationship, you might fear losing the other person, that you try to control them and push them away in the process.
Yeah, so I'm thinking love is like it's a force of nature in that we don't control it, like you two were talking about. We don't force it. We don't generate it necessarily. It's like Hannah's saying, it's something that is always there, like the atmosphere is always there.
You know, if I had to try to scientifically map out love, or define it, describe it, it would be this highest vibration. It would be like a channel or a plane of consciousness that we can tune into. Just like you can tune into ayahuasca as a channel of consciousness that has its unique signature of like a grandmotherly plant medicine with a lot of loving vibes. And then you might go to ibogaine that's going to say, get up off your bike, you know, here's your patterns, like a big wake-up call. You might go to mescaline with another kind of consciousness, or Santa Maria, or psilocybin, Niños Sagrados, or whatever they call it, with their own funny signatures, but love being this pervasive, all-encompassing force that we can tune into by, you know, all sorts of spiritual practices, or by falling in love.
Yeah, and what you're hinting at too is that it's always there. Like, it is our inheritance. If we can become aware of and work on removing our resistance to it, or the barriers to it.
That's the key, I think. And something I've thought about for years is what are the obstacles or barriers to love in myself, and how do I find them and dissolve them?
But love is something you submit to, surrender to.
Yeah.
I'd say.
We just figured it out.
We figured it out.
In real time.
It's all about surrender.
Come as you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna pump the love brakes here. Is it possible that if we surrender or submit to love, that might be, to use an annoying like psychologist term, maladaptive? could it get us into trouble if we let love take the steering wheel?
And that's, I like that, because that's where we bring it back down to the body, like human life, this timeline that we're living on. Because when we're talking about the emotion of love, yes, like we feel the emotion of love. The urge with that is to connect with something. And sometimes we feel that urge to connect with something that doesn't increase the quality of our life. And so does that kind of going off of what you said, like sometimes is to surrender to if we're talking about the emotion of love, the urge to connect with something, sometimes surrendering to that, could get us into some
The problem
poison.
is that love, we define it so many different ways, you know, and if you're talking about unconditional love and surrendering to that, while, like Hannah said, honoring the body and listening to the wisdom of emotions that tell us you're by a cliff, don't jump off, or you've learned a lesson, not safe, don't go there. Unconditional love is hard to argue against, like embodying and surrendering to, if we define it as that.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, and that's the love that unconditional love maybe is that source energy you two were talking about. That God is love, and the way that God is love is that God is unconditional, all accepting, all containing.
The great mystery.
Omni-validating, right? But I like the distinction you make, Hannah, between that and the emotion of love, because like Reeb was saying, there's lots of different ways we define it, and maybe it's the different ways in which love evokes emotion, right? We can have emotions that make us want to commit and stick with a human being. We can have, I love my dog. I love my children. I love the mountains. I love my wife. And these many different ways that the energy of love manifests tends to carry with them different action tendencies. Like they make me want to do different things. Some of which might not be super healthy for my overall well-being.
But love in general, I would call, from an EFT, emotion-focused therapy lens, call an approach emotion, right? Like moving towards another, connecting towards, you know, that beloved or the mountains.
So we're sort of playing around with what love is, with what love means. A question that human minds, ever since they became aware of themselves, have probably been trying to figure out. But I think we can probably talk about how to make it stay, or how to nurture it, or how to cultivate it in a relationship without knowing, without having a precise dictionary definition of what love is, right? Because we all kind of know. Like we were saying before, it's ineffable, but we know it when we feel it. We know it typically, right? We know it when we see it.
So that brings up an interesting, psychological take on how to make love stay. Because if you look at the most famous marriage and family researcher, John Gottman and Julie Gottman, and how they're able to predict with uncanny accuracy if a marriage or relationship will fail based on a number of key factors, signposts. Maybe we can go there for a moment.
Yeah, John and Julie Gottman with their Love Lab, and the couples therapy approach based on their research findings, like Reed said, are some of the most famous love researchers in the world, I guess you could call them. Yeah,
because they observed thousands of couples in this 15-minute interaction, but it only took 3 minutes to get to a 90-something% accuracy of predicting based on a couple main factors if things were destined to crash and burn. One of them being a harsh startup, and then the other being like these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that they describe that many people may have heard of.
So what's the harsh startup? Can we think of an example of a harsh startup?
Instead of going to your partner and saying, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Is now a good time, or can we chat later when the kids are asleep and when you're done with that stressful work deadline, without planting a seed of too much anxiety, rather than coming in like slamming the door open and saying, you forgot to pick up milk at the grocery store. Right. And just coming in like weapons up.
There you are, sitting on the couch again. Well, I've been at work all day, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so maybe there's like a gentleness in what would be the opposite of a harsh start.
So it's coming in with criticism, sarcasm, things like that.
Okay. So coming in with at least one of the four horsemen. The four horsemen being criticism, right? Defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Three of those probably pretty face valid words, but stonewalling, maybe not as obvious what that is, but it's basically cutting yourself off from the other person. The stereotype is, it's the one of the partners is sitting there, not even looking at the other one while, they are sort of complaining or nagging, or
usually the male in their studies.
Yeah. Sort of just cutting off, maybe not even responding or responding with,
Yeah. And the thing about stonewalling is that it typically increases escalation.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Because when you feel like you're not getting through to whoever is like stonewalling, there's immediately this temptation of, I must need to come in guns blazing even more.
Which is a terrible irony, because usually we're stonewalling because we're flooded, right? We are so overwhelmed with this person's intensity or our inability to make these things work, where you've got some learned helplessness on board. It doesn't matter what I do, she's always going to be unhappy with me. And that's why we stonewall. That's why we cut off. And so, like you say, Hannah, it really pisses off the person who's being stonewalled, which tends to increase intensity, which tends to increase the stonewalling.
Yeah, isn't it wild? I've observed this for years, like both in our professional lives and in like personal lives. Isn't it so wild that we trigger the behavior we want to avoid by some of these things? And it takes us a little while to learn and integrate those lessons, like a soft startup, or seeking first to understand rather than reacting defensively. Right. Defensiveness being one of the horsemen, or contempt, like not rolling your eyes when you hear something in the therapy room that you don't enjoy.
If I remember right from Gottman's research, contempt was one of the more insidious horsemen. Yeah. Like when you come in with sarcasm or they're just straight up insults to your partner, that's a pretty telltale sign the relationship's not going well and will likely not last.
Yeah, or like a sense of superiority, I think a sense of equality can go a long way in a relationship.
Yeah, it's a sign of like long-standing negative thoughts that have just been building up, and it's almost like you've rewritten the story as negative, and that often means doom. That means like you need a radical change in perspective. Or maybe, well, it's not back yet, but I hope one day we'll be able to do above ground MDMA couples therapy again, because that is one of the most powerful tools medicine-wise we can envision.
And what is the research telling us? Why do we think MDMA was such a powerful couples therapy tool?
Well, based on how it works, right? The feeling of safety and trust within oneself and of the partner and the therapist, but also that moving towards another. Like there was that fascinating study done by Gould, Dolan, and colleagues. So, like we heard about it at the Horizons conference a little bit, but it was done several years ago, where they sprinkled MDMA in an octopus tank, and the octopi started like socializing, touching one another, doing things that octopi normally don't do. It sounds like the coolest science experiment. But it shows what MDMA does, and you talk to people who have done couples work before it was made illegal, and they just say, wow, like it made us feel like the most amazing therapist, because we just hold space, get out of the way of the medicine, and people move towards each other and work it out in real time in a container of love.
Yeah, it basically sort of mutes the horseman so that your better self can come forward, and then you have these two best selves interacting with one another, and they can talk about things that they would have a hard time talking about otherwise because they have been triggered.
Which, to tie it back to some of those Gottman principles, it opens up the space for like what Gottman would call love mapping.
Yeah.
Like having the fear around like showing up authentically reduced, so that there's this really open expression and communication, but then also that like empathogenic effect of MDMA, where as one partner is opening up, the other one is empathizing so deeply and holding them in safety.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, empathy and compassion. I'm thinking of sort of the antidotes to the four horsemen. Reed, you mentioned the harsh startup, but also the gentle startup
Yeah.
being perhaps an antidote to criticism. So instead of coming in with criticism, you come in with a gentle startup.
Yeah.
One of the things the Gottmans notice is that successful couples for whom love lasted, weren't necessarily couples who didn't argue, right? Sometimes the couples who had
Yeah.
no apparent conflict, like watching
be
their
worse.
videos,
Yes.
were the ones that were much worse. Like the horsemen were still present, they just weren't arguing. It's how they navigated conflict.
Yeah. And so on the other side of criticism might be complaints, which are actually totally necessary in relationships so that growth can happen. And I think the difference would be like criticism is implying there's something wrong with the other person
Right.
versus a complaint is just a reflection of like, this is one thing that I need. So
Yeah.
it's more personal. I'm going to bring a need to the table.
That's a good point too, because it touches on some of these horsemen, like the defensiveness. But if we can take a stance of like receiving, listen, seek first to understand before reacting, gold. If you can do a soft startup when you bring your complaints, golden. Like those are good takeaways that'll take you leaps and bounds. If you can surround the negative moments with positive, that goes a long way, right?
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
can take responsibility instead of being defensive, if you can self-soothe so that you don't need to stonewall. A lot of these skills that just make you a more mentally healthy human can help you navigate conflict in a relationship way healthier.
Yeah, I think there's an attitude too that works related to conflict. Like this attitude of, oh, conflict or difficulties, these are opportunities for growth. This is an opportunity for us to become stronger
Yeah.
together, as opposed to this attitude of like, oh, this is a stumbling block. Like this is a bad sign.
Yeah.
This means something about me. It means something about the relationship. And that totally applies to the individual level too. You all have talked about it plenty on the podcast. When triggers come up, it's an opportunity to do some healing, do some growth.
Yeah, that is the key differentiator, isn't it? Of how do couples see adversity? Is it something that brings them closer because they learn together, or is it something that drives a bigger wedge? And what did you say? I think you may know the data better, but about the ratios of negativity to positivity.
Yeah, there's this ratio out of the Gottman studies that in times of conflict, there should be, for the couples that last, a 5-to-1 ratio of positives to negatives. And then in times without conflict, that ratio is 20-to-1 positives to negatives.
So another key takeaway is surround any complaint with a lot of positive stuff.
Yeah.
Sincere interactions, positive moments, positive compliments.
And there's a formula for complaining, right? For so that it doesn't become contemptuous or critical.
Yeah.
Where you're using I statements. It's more about taking responsibility, like, hey, I felt this way when this happened. When I feel this way, I need, and then you're expressing your need. You're making a request based on the complaint that you are owning, right? It's not like, well, you made me feel this way, right? That's more contemptuous and it's defensive.
Yeah, I want to bring in this idea of cultivating friendship in a relationship too to this, because when you think about your friends, like when there's conflict between your friends, like we're much less likely to take it personal. We're much more likely to be able to kind of laugh about the conflict and repair really quickly. I mean, at least that's something I experience in my friendships for the most part, that, for whatever number of reasons, can become kind of compromised when there's like a romantic dynamic involved. But I think romantic partnerships can also work on cultivating a friendship.
Yeah.
How do we cultivate friendship? We do fun things together. We laugh a lot.
Humor is such a powerful antidote and predictor of positive outcomes, is the ability to laugh through stuff like that. It works wonders. And then the other thing that made me think of is the blame game. Like nothing hits landmines like going in with that opposite of the I feel statements and say, you never take out the trash. Like you want to trigger someone immediately.
Yeah, especially adding the sort of what do we call those, like universal statements that never, always, those kinds of things really hurt.
Yeah, leave them outside of the relationship work.
Yeah, that makes me too want to think about some of the sneakier ways that horseman of defensiveness shows up. Like defensiveness is not always, no, I didn't do that, or no, I don't do that. Sometimes it's a little more like subtle. Like I think there's this form of defensiveness that is like taking the victim kind of stance. Like partner brings a complaint to the table, and then the response is, oh, I can't ever do anything right for you. You know, and so that's this kind of more sneaky form of defensiveness that can show up, as well as that like righteous indignation. So complaints are met with counter complaints.
Yeah. And so the antidote is what? Like take radical responsibility for more than your share. If you're both reaching more than halfway of like, no, this is on me and I'm going to do XYZ. And then they're reaching, no, I'm going to do more than 50% of the effort on my end. And then you just made an incredible buffer, protecting against the bad outcomes.
That's such a good way of describing that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who are in relationships that aren't going well, because they don't feel safe, they feel so vulnerable, they're worried that if they start to do these healthier things, they're not going to be met by their partner with healthier behaviors too. And then, like, but I'm making myself so vulnerable by doing the I statements and he's not doing the I statements. So it's negativity compounds in a relationship, but so does positivity. So, if your partner isn't a psychopath, if they aren't a malignant narcissist, if they are capable of being healthier, you can't control your partner, right? And you're not responsible for healing or changing them. But it's possible that if you, as Reed was talking about, completely own you and bring a fully enlightened and awoken you to the relationship, that that person will then feel the less of a need to be critical or defensive. So it's never too late or too early to start trying to be healthier in your relationship.
So positive words and deeds are a love force multiplier, right? You're just like, and you're depositing in this love bank so much of a buffer and resilience.
Yeah, I was trying to think, reflecting on my own marriage, like, why is it so easy for me to be kind to my wife? Well, I like to think it's because, in part, I'm a nice dude, but a lot of it's because she's really nice to me, right? She cuts me a lot of slack. She's not critical and not judgmental. And I can tell if she is feeling, annoyed or activated, it must be because, just through, 17 years together, I've really screwed up. Like I've done something really, really selfish or insensitive. And I can trust that because of just how kind she is by disposition.
I like how you're bringing that word trust into this, Steve, because as you were talking about that, like we're mutually doing our own work, we're mutually holding ourselves accountable, and the more one person does it, the more the other person does it. Like that feels like one of the ways to cultivate trust. I mean, I know for me that I trust when I can trust that my partner does his own work. Like that's the most important thing, I think, at least personally for me.
And it might take like a little bit of a trust fall in yourself to say, I'm going to do my own work and trust that they're going to do it as well. And it might not be at the exact same rate or pace, the exact same way. But love is this sacred space where you decide you're both going to work on it. You commit to do the work.
Yeah. Can we talk about commitment a little bit? Because I think a lot of listeners have fears around commitment. What do you guys think about that?
I do want to talk about commitment. I want to share one last thought about what we were talking about, because Reed made me think of doing it, if you bring your best self to the relationship and your partner doesn't seem to be doing their own work, it's this trust fall that you described. And even if they don't end up doing their own work, at least you're doing yours. So it's a way to make self-love last, I guess, or self-love stay. Because a lot of people will be listening to this and be like, I do my own work. Like I have been trying so hard to be healthy and my partner just won't, and it's dragging me down.
Yeah, doing your own work can mean a lot of things. Yeah. But and it makes me think of the way to create more love is to give more love. Like, it involves both like reaching more than halfway or both giving, and then it just multiplies. It just grows.
Right. Okay. Commitment.
So commitment.
Commitment. It's so scary sometimes.
You've got to feel safe enough to be able to bare your soul, right? You've got to be safe enough to get real and vulnerable. And so that's one thing commitment can do is create a safe container.
Yeah, but commitment can also really only be done in a safe container. So it's like this two-way street. And I get the fear of commitment for all of those listeners out there who deal with that. But it's interesting, if that's like where you feel like you are in your journey, maybe ask yourself this question, like, what if I felt totally safe? Then would I still have that fear? And this place that I'm kind of at with this idea of commitment is like this. It's like, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice at all, potentially, to commit in the container of a safe relationship. It actually feels like a choice. So it's therefore really empowering. It's like I get to elect to commit to another person. So it's this like beautiful soup of like both saying like, here you go, committing to you, but also like, this is totally my choice. I'm totally free in this decision to do this. And I'm stoked to, because there's safety.
It's like a sacred contract or a celebratory act of like just saying you are going to do this together, rather than the traditional ball and chain view of certain commitments, which is very unfortunate.
Commitment tying you down or fettering you.
Taking your freedom, where in reality it could create a safe foundation from which you can fly and be even more free.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Hannah, because you talk about safety and trust, that when they are there, it's more empowering, it's easier to commit. And I guess it goes both ways, right? Like it's because I am committed, I feel more safety and trust. But also my brain's grinding to a halt, but like, because there is safety and trust, I feel freer to commit, right? Does that make sense? Like
it's a paradox. One of the paradoxes of love, and there are many. But it's like commitment helps you fully dive in, or commitment is when you say, we're going to walk up this staircase together, and it might be a couple ups and downs along the way, and you don't know how it's going to go, but you're just making that conscious contract with one another to do it, to show up in the best way you can. Yeah,
it's so much easier to allow yourself to be imperfect in a relationship when commitment is there, because you know that, hey, even if I'm imperfect, unless that imperfection is a deal breaker for the commitment contract, then I can just be imperfect, and that's okay. And my partner will forgive me, and I'll forgive her imperfections, and we'll grow together.
Yeah.
Do you have a thought?
Yeah, no, I was just going to reiterate that. That growing together piece of being imperfect, like this, I can bring my imperfections to the relationship. Like I can bring my vulnerabilities, I can bring my fears, I can bring my flaws or shortcomings, and like they'll just be met with love, which is probably then going to help me level up in ways.
Transmute, transform. Another EFT concept is transforming emotion with emotion, and love being the most powerful emotion/force that can help us do that.
Cool.
I lost my train of thought.
Well, I'm thinking more about commitment, but also where this can go weird for people. Because a lot of our listeners are listening right now, and they're thinking, yeah, well, I was in a committed relationship with somebody who treated me terribly. And it was hard for me to get out because I committed, And, there are probably some behaviors that happen in relationships that we should, I don't know if we can just say like, these are a series of behaviors, these are a series of ways of interacting that are deal breakers universally. But, abuse comes to mind. Physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, those kinds of things.
You got to set the ground rules.
Right.
The non-negotiables. And it might not be, you left your socks on the floor, I'm out. It's going to be some of those other things you mentioned. But I like that idea of being able to commit, like I commit to do the work as we are, rather than this idea of you need to change, you need to level up to my level, or it's not going to work. Because if you go in wanting the other person to be different, you're doomed.
Yeah, commitment with conditions doesn't necessarily work. Like, yeah, I'm committing and I want her to be different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm committing to this relationship with the thought that I need to make them be somebody that they're not, so that I can then feel safe and fully committed.
And that happens so often. I see that with a lot of my clients. Like they're basing their level of commitment not on like what is, but on maybe even what was or hopes for the future.
Yeah. There's a song that this whole thing makes me think of that we could put in the show notes called Grow As We Go by Ben Platt.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful lyrics.
I think you
we
brought
said it before.
Yeah, you brought it in the last episode.
Well,
it's a good song. I listened to it after you brought it up last time. It's a beautiful song. I love the concept. I did. I love the concept of growing as we go.
Yeah. Because it talks about how, we're going to change in our own individual way, like change meaning transform at our own pace and transmute all these past hurts and wounds and maladaptive patterns, but they're not going to be exactly in parallel. But if we can hold space for the other, I mean, that's one thing about a loving, intimate partnership is it's the accelerated path of progress in some ways because you get to be a mirror to each other and you get to hold space for that transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of commitment, and making love stay, is there a scenario in which you would break up in order to make love stay?
Yeah, I think so. That would be fun. I'm curious on what your thoughts are. I'll actually tie this back to like a DBT. It's a DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy premise, which is, and it's fun to train this in skills training because when you're looking at regulating emotions or changing unwanted emotions, it's fun to put love on the board and see what people do. Like, the first reaction is like, why would I want to change love? And it's like, well, why would you? Because sometimes we have that emotion of love and like the draw towards something that I think I said earlier, like doesn't increase the quality of our life. Like, I think that's kind of the real thing to look at real mindfully and check the facts on. And maybe that just means like this kind of unhappiness for a long period of time, or like there actually are some destructive patterns in the relationship that prevent me from being my best self.
Yeah.
And that might be some of the little nudges of like, oh, maybe this love is there, but
you've got to be
to
ready.
move away, to do in DBT, do opposite action, which is actually move away from the thing you feel drawn to.
Yeah, because I think in some ways we attract people who are complementary to our psychopathologies or who are at our level of personal development. So it's a matter of do your own work, grow, and attract that someone who's energetically in a similar place, and be aware of the risk to try and plug a hole of loneliness by going back into another relationship. Because that's another pattern we see, right? Is, I blame them, it's not working, throw them aside, get another person, blame them, and it might take a while until we realize, whoa, I have all these unhealed parts of myself I need to work on before I can be ready to give and receive love.
I just, as we're talking about this another song popped into my head, and I was looking it up on my phone because it was just a song from my childhood that I don't remember who the artist was, but it's Love Hurts. Love hurts, love scars. And so I looked up the lyrics. Love wounds and marks. Any heart not tough or strong enough to take a lot of pain, take a lot of pain. Love is like a cloud, holds a lot of rain. Love hurts. Ooh, love hurts. Yeah.
Wow. I feel so sad for anybody that feels that way of love. But I also get it, right? Like, and when we're thinking about just that emotion of love that draws, it's like, I think about loving something like a substance that's like really harmful for you. And it's like, yeah, that emotion, that draw to something could be there, but that doesn't mean
I've talked to clients who
worthy of it.
Who are in love with heroin. Like they have a relationship to a substance for sure.
You might call that attachment, then. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, love has so many definitions, but those waters get really muddy when we look at it that way. But, because, I think you will get hurt in a loving relationship. It's like you open your heart, there's uncertainty, you surrender to love. There will be moments of feeling pain, and it's the other side of the coin of the ecstatic bliss.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of like trusting that you're both in this together and that you can work through it together.
Yeah, in a weird way, I think it's the contrast of pain and bliss that makes a loving relationship so wonderful. Like, no one can hurt you like a lover, but no one can make you feel euphoric like a lover either. And if the pain's not present, then you don't feel the love and the bliss as exquisitely.
Yeah, I kind of got in touch with that one a little bit recently. Like the vulnerability underneath love, like, is so painful. Like the fear of losing somebody that you love is like, so it's just a very deep kind of human pain. But if we're not in touch with it, or like don't feel that one, then it's really hard, like, to receive what we need, right? If we can't admit our vulnerabilities, like, how are we ever going to bring in what we need to nurture those? But B, like, there's just kind of a numbing that happens when we deny some of those pains underneath attachment or love. And as we numb the fear, we're also going to numb some of that really good stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You've got to lean into the discomforts, or else you're going to be left with some of those obstacles or barriers to love, right? You got to work on these blocks, even our fear of feeling longing, desire, or discomfort with a fear of losing someone.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how brave it is to really love, like to really say, okay, we're doing this.
It makes it so rewarding, right? Just kind of referencing what I was saying earlier, that because it is so risky, because you make yourself so vulnerable when you open yourself up to a partner, when they handle your vulnerability with safety and care, it's the best thing in the world. And if it wasn't risky, it wouldn't be that, it wouldn't feel that great.
It wouldn't be that
High
great.
risk,
It'd be
high reward.
underwhelming. Yeah. Underwhelming.
You see that in these conscious relationships that have gone through a phase of like having difficulty or having to figure out that rhythm. And a lot of people almost crashing and burning, but figuring it out together and getting to the other side of that to a beautiful journey.
Yeah. Relationships, like we were talking about with triggers and using those struggles as opportunities for growth, like relationships that go through a refiner's fire are, better on the other side. It's one of the reasons why makeup sex is so good and so intense, because it's infused with the fire of the conflict that you've then navigated so well.
Reminds me of Sue Johnson's tango metaphor. Sue Johnson of emotionally focused therapy, one of the other great marriage gurus on the planet. Who just has this idea that there will be that spiciness, there will be the ups and downs, but it's a matter of maintaining the connection, the attunement to each other along the way, like in tango.
Yeah, even seeing that like ebb and flow of closeness and distance and conflict and bliss in a relationship as a dance, right? It's like we're doing this dance. And even in these moments where there is that spiciness, it's all part of this dance. It's lovable.
Yeah. Yeah, you embrace it and you play with those energies.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not much of a dancer, but from what I understand, in partner dance, like sometimes one partner will lead and sometimes the other will lead. And I like that idea in a relationship. Like when I'm doing really well and maybe it gives my wife almost the permission to not do well if she needs to. Like if she needs to relax, if she needs to recharge, if she needs to not feel well for a bit, because I have strength, she can, and vice versa. When she's strong and I need moments to not be strong, she takes the lead in the dance. And again, trust and commitment allows for that dance to take place in a way that we're not stepping on each other's toes.
Yes. Yep. trust and commitment allows for that dance to take place. It allows you to play with the energies. I think desire is such a fun energy to play with. Like, it implies separation. But it's so fun to like notice that energy even in the body and how it manifests as this like longing and intensity. And I don't know. Desire can be something to be desired.
Yeah,
exactly.
Even if it's bittersweet, right? That's a book I'm currently really enjoying by Susan Cain, called Bittersweet, and talks about the melancholy and the desire side of the coin, that you're not always going to be in close proximity to your lover. They will be on a trip, they'll be at work, they'll be sleeping when you're awake or whatever it is. And there's this longing, but without those spaces in your togetherness, you wouldn't feel the blissful part of love in the same way.
Yeah, and the creativity that comes from the bittersweet and the longing and the missing. I mean, I just think there's so much creative potential there, right? How many songs were written from that place?
Yeah.
But also, like, I can see how this separation, this space, gives room to even think about ways like to get creative in the relationship. What can I bring to this?
There is a David Whyte poem on the topic, if we want to go there.
Yeah. Why not? We're talking about songs and poems. It's very apropos to the topic of love.
This is a book by David Whyte, one of the greatest poets out there, in my opinion, called The Sea and You, 20 Poems of Requited and Unrequited Love. Okay, and let's see. It's called Love in the Night. I mean, there's so many good ones in here, but sometimes when you lie close to me, your body is so still in my arms. I find myself half in love with your barely breathing form, and half in love with the unspeaking silent source from which you came. I find myself touching your lips with mine to feel their warmth, and bowing my head to hear your breath, and stilling myself to listen far inside you for the gentle rise and fall of the tide that tells me you are still free to come and go in life. So that I take your hand in mine, to sense your pulse and touch your hair and stroke your cheek and move my lips to yours, to feel the warmth emerging from your inward self, and to see we are still here and still pledged to breathe this world together. All night like this, I find myself asleep and awake, turn towards the moon and turn toward you, your warmth, inviting me to bring you close and leave you alone. All night I find myself unable to choose between the love I feel for you through closeness and the grief of having to let you go through distance, so that it seems I can only breathe fully in the dark by taking you in and giving you away in your quiet rhythm of appearance and disappearance, letting you return only in your breathing and not breathing, or your half-sighed phrases spoken in the dark, whispered from the dream in which you live, so that I lie between sleeping and waking, seeing you are here and dreaming you are gone, wanting to hold you and wanting to let you go, living far inside you as you breathe close to me, and living far beyond you as I wait through the hours of the night for you to wake, and find me again, the light in your eyes, half dreaming on the pillow, looking back at me, seeing me at last, not knowing how far I have traveled, through what distance I have come to find you, where I have been or what I have seen, how far or near, not knowing how I have gained and lost you 100 times between darkness and dawn.
And that last line. Gained and lost
It's a
you 100
tearjerker,
times
isn't it?
between darkness and dawn. Yeah, I mean, when you listen to a skillful poet write about love, it all of a sudden makes sense why humans have been murdering each other over this feeling, why they travel long distances, why, I don't know, why love is this all-encompassing energetic force that has driven our species since we were aware of our own minds. Powerful.
It is. It reminds me of Rumi's, I think it was Rumi and not Hafez, but let there be spaces in your togetherness, let the winds dance in between you. Like it touches on what Hannah was just saying about, like, that's an energy that you can play with. If you can survive it, if you can like have a kind of a meditative approach to a loving relationship, know that there's going to be bliss and there's going to be longing. There will be sad moments too. Then that's when you have this open heart, you feel it all, and you've got that powerful force flowing through you that you can use as you like float and dance and flow through life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
there's an intensity to really surrendering to love. It's just an intense experience, and I think some people are up for it.
Like skydiving.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty apt metaphor for love sometimes.
Yeah.
Feels like you're tumbling through the atmosphere, through space.
Buckle up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there are any other practical tips, strategies, or things to consider for our listeners as they try to make love stay in their lives, in their committed relationships, or if they're looking for a committed relationship. How might we help them make love stay?
Well, go ahead, Hannah.
I was just
please.
going to say a real easy one that I help my clients with sometimes is just creating rituals with their partner.
Yeah.
I mean, just daily rituals to connect. And, a ritual in a partnership is like, this is something that's ours. It's something that we do every morning. We have coffee outside together or whatever it is. And that can be a real kind of easy thing to bring in.
The ways that keep you connected, like the tango metaphor, that help you know that they're still there. Like that's Sue Johnson's big premise. It's the question in the uncertainty of love when you've surrendered is, are you still there? Do you still have my back?
Mm-hmm.
And maintaining that attunement through ways like those rituals, I think is beautiful. You can punctuate the uncertainty of everything with like connection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the idea of cultivating friendship. Hannah, you were talking about friendship earlier. Especially when you're in a relationship for a long time, you might want to try new things together. Have new experiences together. A new experience with a familiar partner all of a sudden makes the partnership new again.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really interesting. You'll see, I mean, like I've said, I've been married to my wife for 17 years. We do something new together. Sometimes I will like see her in a different light.
Yeah.
All of a sudden she's new to me again, and that just lights the spark again of the relationship. We can be new together again.
Yeah, I think the importance of those experiences is illustrated when a relationship ends. Because what's the thing that happens in grief that people always like feel so much pain about is those experiences and missing those and remembering how amazing they were, how much fun they had.
Mm-hmm.
I think creating experiences is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, and riffing on what we were just talking about, absence making the heart grow fonder. Sometimes you have to build that in deliberately, like a little bit of separation. This might sound a little weird, but like especially for couples, we're coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been like locked in our homes around each other a lot. Sometimes deliberately cultivating some space can then build that tension so that when you return, things are much better.
Tension's a good way to put it too.
Yeah.
That tension that can build that longing, that realizing how much you care and miss the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And building in the time for togetherness with the new experiences. I think Gottman even has a framework for that with his 5 hours or something like that. Just talking about how it doesn't take that much time to have a moment of connection or a ritual perhaps of at the end of each night, just spending a moment together, like looking into one another's eyes and saying, I love you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that demonstrates love is taking the time and making the effort to understand your partner's stories, understand their history, right? Because oftentimes, and the Gottmans talk about this, that when there's conflict, it's usually about the stories behind the conflict, right? It's not necessarily about the garbage. It's about other things in their past. And if you've taken the time and made the effort to understand that about your partner, then it shows interest, that you give a crap, and people want to have crap given about them, right? We want people to love us. So you can demonstrate that by knowing like, oh, okay, I know like it hurt when she uttered that defensive statement, but I know why she gets defensive. So I can have compassion for it. It's easy for me to let that go and have compassion because I've taken the time to understand her stories.
And how do we do that? Open-ended questions, right?
Yeah.
Like, help me understand what it was like for you when this happened.
Yeah, understand one another's love languages. Even if you take a quiz about it and talk through it. But one of my favorite Gottman stories you just reminded me of is when he was talking about this client, like a 70 or 80-year-old man who he was telling this to, like, do you understand your partner's, your lover's hopes and dreams? They were in this like difficult place in their relationship. And he's like, oh no, I need to go. He gets up from the session. He drives home because he needed to ask her, like, honey, what are your hopes and dreams?
Yeah,
That's a
and
great
when you
story.
know that, right, when you know each other's hopes and dreams, then you can create shared meaning together, which is another thing the Gottmans talk about, right? Is we know our goals, we are united, we're headed in the same direction. They can be parallel paths, they can even wander away from one another, but as long as we have similar trajectories, following similar north stars, then it's hard to drift apart.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a good practical takeaway for listeners too, is create some shared dreams together.
Yeah,
Get them down.
review them, go over them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun. You can just Google these, but there are these fun card games, kind of like.
Esther Perel's got one.
Does she have a card game?
Oh, yeah, I've got it.
I got one from a company called Intelligent Change. They're the one that did the 5-minute journal,
Cool.
which is a hilarious product, like $20 for a journal that basically asks you 5 questions that you can get from a blog post. Anyway, great marketing, folks. But I bought the cards, and they're just basically questions that help you ask your partner questions you might not think of.
Yeah.
To try
Those
to
are great.
generate that familiarity.
Yeah, because the real relationship goal is like trusting and understanding each other and getting in there with that friendship, humor, shared meaning. Because one thing to have some chemistry together, but it's a whole nother thing to like build a life together with shared values.
Yeah. And sharing your mind and sharing the contents of your heart with somebody else.
Yeah. Share fondness, admiration, be generous with it. Make it a goal to compliment your partner more than you think you need to. And if it gets annoying or it seems insincere, they'll tell you.
20-1.
Yeah. Yeah. Act on that data. That's good data. Any other hot tips, guys?
Tips.
I think we solved it. I think we've taught everybody how to make love stay. Good job. Thank you, dear listener, for listening. It means a lot to me. Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Novamind, a mental health company that specializes in psychedelic medicine and research. You can learn more about Novamind's mission to increase access to legal, safe, and evidence-based psychedelic medicine at novamind.ca. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're using to listen or watch. Also, if you're feeling generous today, please leave us a glowing review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. If you'd like to reach out to us with questions, suggestions, scathing criticisms, etc., please email us at psychfrontiers@novamind.ca. Thanks again. The content of this podcast does not constitute medical advice or mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you believe you are in need of mental health treatment.